We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. The rare late Friday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, Saturday morning, depending on where you are. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. We are talking day 2 of the NCAA Tournament. It is just about complete as we are live here on Saturday, a little after midnight Eastern on the East Coast. Friday night everywhere else. I believe we still have one game going on, Oregon Liberty. Not sure how many people saw Richie McKay's hairline, but some weird stuff going on there for the Liberty head coach. But Oregon, it appears as though, is in pretty good shape. And I think they're going to go ahead and win that one. Michigan State has officially pulled away from Bryant. So 2 games still going on, but we're going to react to what was a little bit of a tame Friday in college basketball. I think that's a byproduct of, frankly, the transfer portal. A lot of good players are transferring up. The top teams are better, but whatever. And we still have a lot to talk about. We'll open Kentucky Wildcats. They roll past Troy. I am so impressed by the resilience of this team. How do they match up on Sunday with the Illinois Fighting Illini, who just beat the Xavier Musketeers? From there, we will talk the Arizona Wildcats. So it's going to be a Wildcat on Wildcat segment to open the show. I think Arizona might be the most underrated team in this field. They roll past a pretty good Akron team. I think they could be a threat to make a deep run. We'll talk about UConn, which has now won 13 straight NCAA tournament games after beating Oklahoma. A little bit on some of the big names that played on Friday: Duke, Florida, Alabama struggles. And I think we'll close. I think we'll do this over the course of the next few weeks. As these prominent schools start to get eliminated, what needs to change? What needs to happen in the offseason? And we'll start with the North Carolina Tar Heels, who closed Friday. Their season ends with the win over Ole Miss. So it's Friday night. We appreciate everybody jumping in. And we got ourselves a loaded late night show. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Podcast. New clips, new videos on YouTube going up every single day. So make sure you're subscribed there. Also, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure that you are subscribed on podcast as well. Tell you what, Producer Matt, you know who I want to congratulate and thank and tell how much we appreciate off the top? I didn't prepare you for this, but we got to thank our partners. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank BetUS TV and everything that they do for the Aaron Torres pod, okay? So BetUS TV, we have been working with them for a couple years now. They sent us to Phoenix for the Final Four last year, where we saw a UConn Huskies national championship. We're going to San Antonio on behalf of BetUS TV. I don't know if we'll see the Huskies in 2025, but we cannot wait to get down there. We will be down there 2 weeks from today, preparing for the Saturday semifinals in San Antonio. We're staying through the national championship game, and it's all because of BetUS TV, okay? So it's that time of year. You need updates on everything going on in the world of sports. College basketball. You need updates on the NBA, Major League Baseball as we get out of spring training into the regular season. That's where BetUS TV comes in. Wall-to-wall coverage of pretty much every sport across the globe, a big European soccer presence for those of you who are into that. The college basketball coverage is second to none. Not only are they partners of the Aaron Torres pod, but also their college basketball coverage with my buddy Corby, with Jeff Nadeau, formerly of Barstool. They do an awesome job covering college basketball, especially this time of year. So thank you to our partners. Thank you to our friends. Thank you to BetUS TV. We will be with them all March into April through the Final Four and beyond. Also, before we get started, should send another quick reminder that you know who else we have to thank on an evening like tonight? We got to thank another friend, another partner, SeatGeek and SeatGeek.com and the SeatGeek ticketing app. They are the official ticketing partner of the Aaron Torres pod, especially in March Madness. And we are just so grateful for SeatGeek, the opportunity that they have provided. And oh, by the way, all the games that they have gotten you guys to over the course of the last couple days. I know a lot of you have taken advantage of our opportunities, but for those of you who are just tuning in, here's what you need to know. It's March. You want to go watch your team. Maybe you're a Kentucky fan in Milwaukee looking for tickets for Sunday. Maybe you're a St. John's, Arkansas fan looking for tickets on Saturday. It's late. It's not too late. Maybe you're a UConn fan looking for tickets to Raleigh on Sunday. Guess where you got to go? You got to go to SeatGeek. SeatGeek has 28 million downloads. It's the #1 rated ticketing app, and with over 70,000 events. It's not just college basketball. So you want to go to a spring training game. You want to go to a major league game. You want to go to a hockey game. I said it the other day. My mom used SeatGeek to get tickets to a hockey game this coming week. But here's the best part. It's not only that you can use SeatGeek, it is that listeners of the Aaron Torres pod can take advantage of a very special offer. If you use promo code Torres at checkout, promo code Torres, Torres, you get $20 off your first purchase courtesy of SeatGeek. So go to SeatGeek.com, download the app on your phone, use promo code Torres. It doesn't just have to be college basketball, by the way. You're going to a concert, you're going to a show, you're going to a sporting event that isn't March Madness. Use SeatGeek. We appreciate their support. Promo code Torres is what you want to use at checkout to get $20 off. With that said, it was a busy but somewhat not so crazy Friday in college basketball. Michigan State is closing out a win. Oregon is closing out a win. There were no major upsets. So let's go ahead and just kind of bounce around, get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, listen, I think we could start in a million different places. Why don't we go ahead and start with the team that was featured on primetime Friday night in Milwaukee, the Kentucky Wildcats. And listen, Kentucky is such a wild story. Like, you think about their season. You think about the teams that we're talking about that are good enough to win national championships, Florida, Duke, etc., Tennessee. Kentucky beat a darn bunch of them, okay? They beat Duke to open the regular season, beat Florida, beat Tennessee. Obviously, Kentucky is dealing with injuries. And I thought it was kind of crazy. I was thinking about this going into the night of the opening round the opening round Friday of the NCAA tournament. Think about all the teams that we're talking about going into the NCAA tournament. Is Florida a title contender? Is Duke a title contender? What's wrong with Auburn? What's wrong with Bama? Arkansas beating Kansas. What's wrong with Kansas? The surprise teams, the BYU, schools like that. I don't feel like anybody was talking Kentucky, but I also know that Friday night was darn important to Kentucky, not just because you want to get an NCAA tournament win, but there's a couple variables at play. First NCAA tournament game under Mark Pope. We know that, of course, Mark Pope had yet to win an NCAA tournament game. Now, I largely thought that was a nonsense stat, to be perfectly honest, because, listen, for most of his career, he was coaching at Utah Valley and then BYU in the WCC. His best team at BYU's tournament was canceled because of COVID. So I didn't really care that he had never won a tournament game, but Pope had never had a tournament win. Also worth noting, by the way, I do think, I said it to our guy, Mark, who runs our Torres on UK page. I said, there's a little PTCD, post-traumatic Cal syndrome going on at Kentucky. We all remember Oakland. We all remember St. Peter's. And so I thought this was just a really important game for Kentucky to come out, get the win. And I think quietly the fan base was maybe a little bit more nervous than they should have been, because it's just, we've seen this story before. Well, there are no real issues as Kentucky gets the victory to open the NCAA tournament. They beat 14th seed Troy. Final score 76-57. First off, I'll say this. Listen, it was a little bit of maybe a closer game than I think a lot of people, maybe if you weren't watching, if you weren't paying attention, maybe a little bit closer than people realized. It was a 6-point game at halftime. I think Troy cut it to about 6 or so, 7-8 minutes to go. I think it was 13 minutes to go. It was a 6-point game, as a matter of fact. But as you can see, bottom of the screen, producer Matt just found a great stat. Kentucky goes on a monster run in the second half to close Troy, put them away. It isn't even close. And I'll tell you this, man, again, I think it's a different kind of march for Kentucky, a 16-0 run, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, where I think expectations are different. I think injuries have played a factor, but I give credit to the resilience of this team. And I'll tell you what, I just don't think you can count them out with the dudes that they have, the toughness that they have, and the resilience that they've shown all year. Listen, you talk about all these teams across college basketball. I thought the most interesting stat that came out this weekend, Kentucky fans, you could correct me in the chat, but what did Mark Pope say at his press conference on Sunday when that selection committee revealed the bracket? That Kentucky has among the bottom 10, I don't even know the right terminology, but basically minutes continuity in college basketball. In other words, among the projected lineup that was expected in the preseason, Kentucky is in bottom 10 in terms of the amount of minutes that those guys actually played together. We've talked about it all year. Early in the season, Kirk Kriisa goes down with an injury. Then you're starting to deal with that. Then Andrew Carr gets hurt. Then Andrew Carr gets healthy and Lamont Butler goes down. Then Lamont Butler comes back and Jackson Robinson goes down. Then Lamont Butler goes down again. Then Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler come back. Then Jackson Robinson's out for the year. Then Lamont Butler comes back, but he's playing with one shoulder. And you know what? It doesn't matter because this team finds ways to win, and I give them credit. I think, first of all, I think that the thing, if you're looking for a positive with this Kentucky team, just different guys and resilient guys stepping up every night. First of all, Otega Oweh's a beast, okay? We've said it since November, probably since the Duke game. Otega Oweh, I was not familiar with your game, okay? I was familiar with his game, but I don't think that I realized quite how good this kid was and, frankly, how important he was going to be to this team as the season went on. Because, frankly, Kentucky just didn't really have very many guys after Jackson Robinson gets hurt. He has 20 points in this game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals. I don't know what his future is. In other words, is he going to go pro? Is he going to come back? My guess is he comes back. If he comes back, we're talking about a potential first-team All-American next year, certainly a preseason first-team All-American and just an alpha. But I think what stands out to me about this Kentucky team is their ability to continue to step up night after night, game after game with different guys. On Friday night, you look at the guys off the bench, Brandon Garrison, 13 points, 6 boards, 2 steals, 2 assists off the bench. Colin Chandler, he's another one. I think give him an offseason where he's getting back into basketball shape. Remember, this was a kid that was on a Mormon mission, didn't play basketball at all for 2 full calendar years. 9 points in 10 minutes off the bench for this kid. He has been playing much better the second half of the year. Trent Noah gave him great minutes. And I think that's the thing that's most impressive to me. I'm not going to oversell a win over Troy. I'm not going to pretend like it's the greatest win in the history of college basketball. But you're talking about a team without one of their best scorers. You're talking about a team with a point guard basically playing with one shoulder. Lamont Butler in 25 minutes, 0 points, 3 assists, the resilience of that kid. And I'll tell you what, as we start to transition, we start to talk and we start to think about Sunday, whenever they play, I don't know if it's officially been announced yet, but they will play Illinois. And I think that's a very interesting matchup because I think the default is, well, Illinois is more talented. Illinois is playing better. I don't know if they're playing better, but they were awesome on Friday night against Xavier. Xavier just didn't have the dudes to keep up with Illinois. By the way, let's see if Sean Miller is still at Xavier next year. That's another conversation for another day. He might be the front runner for Texas. But I just bring it up because Illinois got a bunch of dudes, but Illinois is wildly inconsistent. To me, Illinois is actually a little bit the reverse Kentucky. Kentucky, every game you get a little bit of a different lineup, and you don't really know how they continue to win because the guys in this lineup just continue to get kind of banged up and nicked up and hurt and this and that. And yet Kentucky keeps finding ways. Illinois is the opposite. They're crazy talented, but one night they look like they did against Xavier tonight. And then the next night they look, not very good and not really in position, to have success. And so to me, we've talked about it all year. I understand that, Bruce Pearl's going to win SEC Coach of the Year, that a Todd Golden is going to be in the conversation for National Coach of the Year. I do think, though, what Mark Pope continues to do with this team is as impressive as pretty much anybody anywhere in college basketball. Again, game after game after game after game after game. Every game, the lineup's a little bit different. Even when you have guys playing, they're nowhere close to healthy. And so I give Mark Pope a ton of credit. I am fascinated to see this team moving forward because I don't think the season's over. Listen, Illinois is a really good team. We don't have point spreads yet. I think it's possible that Illinois is favored, but I think the opposite is true. Like I said a second ago, I think Illinois right now has a ton of talent, but you have no idea what you're getting game to game from them. from Kentucky, you have guys night after night after night overachieving and finding ways to put the ball in the basket and win. So I give Kentucky a ton of credit for getting past Troy. And like I said, I think low key that was maybe a more important game I think that was low key a little bit more important of a game for the Kentucky fan base than maybe a lot of people realized. Producer Matt, I know I said we're going to go right into Arizona, but I think what I want to do is take a quick break. We'll come back. I want to talk the Arizona Wildcats, who I think, frankly, might be the most underrated team in this field. We'll talk about them. UConn advances. We actually have a great question about Will Wade in the chat that we'll get to in a minute. So we'll go to our first break, come back, talk Arizona and UConn. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So we will get to the rest of Friday in college hoops. But really quickly, Thomas Chop House Cards. I assume that's a Louisville fan. I don't know if you own a Chop House, but I will probably be in Louisville sometime in the next year. So, I'm not saying, but maybe I'll swing by. He actually asked a very good question. So I saw this report. Let's just touch on it really quick. Let me also mention this. There's a lot of college basketball shows. I'm not knocking anybody, but it's the truth. Once the season ends, they only want to talk tournament. And then when the season ends, they just want to do whatever it is they do in the offseason. Well, I bring it up because we will not do that. We're going to talk all of the nitty-gritty of college hoops, the portal, the couple high school players that remain uncommitted, Nate Ament, Koa Pete. I think there's actually going to be some movement, maybe with some committed players. Stay tuned on that. And I bring it up because there was a very interesting report that came out that Thomas Chop House Cards mentions that says thoughts on the report of Will Wade bringing in Andrew Slater from the Oklahoma City Thunder to NC State. Wow. Okay, so I'll be real. I just saw this probably 20 minutes before I went on air. I don't know when this was reported, when it was announced, but I did see it while I was prepping for the show. Let me say this. I think it's relevant for a couple things. One, it just shows Will Wade is going to NC State. And I'll be honest, even as of last night, I was still being told nothing was signed, nothing was finalized. I think Will Wade, from a public perception standpoint, I think it's kind of hard to back out now. You basically acknowledge I've taken the job. Listen, I think if Texas opened tomorrow and they called Will Wade and said, you're the guy, here's $7 million a year to come coach, I think he'd have trouble turning it down. But I never knew if Will Wade was necessarily at the top of the list. I think he has gotten speculation that he might not be. And so it sounds like he's going to NC State. So that is significant for that reason. The other reason is Andrew Slater is a freaking beast. Okay. So for people who don't know Andrew Slater, he was a guy who was kind of one of these mystery Twitter accounts, but I've met him in person. I've seen him at grassroots events for a decade now. Very interesting guy. The one thing you need to know about Andrew Slater, he has every connection in the book. Every single guy he knows the backstory to, the good, the bad, this is the guy you got to talk to. This is the uncle that's actually making the decision. Mom is the one calling the shots. He has a girlfriend there. I'm not being sarcastic when I tell you I've never met anybody more plugged in the grassroots circuit. By the way, that's why the Oklahoma City Thunder hired him, because he has so many connections in that world. And now it sounds like he's coming to NC State. And I'll just tell you this, Will Wade, with him, it's game on. I'm just telling you, we did a segment on the show yesterday about Will Wade and McNeese and why I think this was the guy that nobody in the ACC, including John Shire, wanted anything to do with. Will Wade, listen, Duke's got a 40-year head start. I know NC State won a title in 1983. I know they made a Final Four last year. I'm here to tell you, Will Wade is going to be a freaking problem in the ACC. And I'll take it a step further. I think this is just good for the ACC. ACC is kind of a mess. I tweeted this out on Friday. There are more Patinos in the round of 32, two of them, Rick at St. John's, Richard at New Mexico, than there are ACC teams. Louisville gets knocked out. UNC gets knocked out. Of course, Clemson gets knocked out by Will Wade. So Duke's the only ACC team remaining. But I think the ACC, listen, everybody wants to cry river of tears when all these old guys retire. I think they needed fresh blood in that league. I think Jay Lucas is going to be good at Miami. I think Will Wade is going to be phenomenal at NC State. And it's worth mentioning Thomas Chophouse Cards. Pat Kelsey is a beast at Louisville as well. I think this is I think we're going to see a resurgence. I think the ACC over the next couple of years is going to go back to probably a 5, 6, 7 bid league. Also worth noting, by the way, North Carolina has some stuff that has to get figured out. We will discuss that here in a moment. With that said, let's keep it going. Let's get back to the games of the night. And again, it wasn't a crazy night, but I do think there was something significant that happened at the Seattle Regional, or as my buddy Mike Luke calls it, Rainy Smelly Seattle, in honor of the Washington football coach Jed Fish, who left Arizona for Washington. But I bring it up because, listen, it was an interesting regional. You don't really know what you're going to expect, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Well, I bring it up because Arizona comes into this game, and Arizona's just kind of, I just feel like for the most part, largely quietly been off the radar for most of the season. They struggled in the out of conference, and we're gonna talk about the game on Friday night. But they struggled in the out of conference, so it felt like even when they got good, they were completely like not underseeded, but underranked in the polls. And I don't think anybody realized how good Arizona was all year. They go to the Big 12 tournament championship game, beating Kansas and Kansas, beating Texas Tech, and going into the NCAA tournament, you weren't really sure. I'll tell you this, we're doing all the survivor pools, NCAA brackets. I did pick Arizona to win, but this felt like a game where we could potentially see an upset. Akron is a top 10 scoring team in college basketball, averaged 84 points per game coming into this one. You worried about Akron. Could they scare Arizona? The only thing that was scary was the Arizona performance, because they get the victory. 93-65 Arizona wins. And I'm here to tell you, I really do think that we could be talking about a situation where Arizona is, in my opinion, potentially the most underrated team left in this tournament. So let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, Friday night, it was just sheer dominance. There's no other way to put it. Again, Akron came into the game averaging 83 points per game. They put up 65 on 33% shooting from the field. They shoot 28% from 3, 7 of 25. Arizona dominates the glass, out-rebounding them by 29 boards. How about this? For a team that sometimes struggles with 21 assists for the Arizona Wildcats on 39 made baskets. It was beautiful, okay? It was a thing of beauty. Everybody contributed, and it was interesting even listening to the game. Robbie Hummel, Robbie Hummel's great, but he does a lot of Big Ten games. He does a lot of Big East games. I don't think he's probably seen Arizona in person this year, and you kind of could just hear him like, oh, this team checks all the boxes. Jalen Rose, who obviously I don't believe has done any college basketball at all that I'm aware of this year, was on the call as well. They were so impressed, and I think you saw what this team is capable of in this game. First of all, you look across the board, just contributions from everybody. Trey Townsend, I know he has taken a little bit of heat from the fan base. He was the high-profile transfer, ironically, from Oakland, struggled during the regular season. He looks like old school March Trey Townsend. I believe my buddy Mike Luke has coined that term, so I'm sorry if I stole that from you, Mike. I love you, buddy. 16 points, 8 boards for Trey Townsend. Jaden Bradley, even in a sport where most of these teams have kind of that guard that can be a difference maker off the dribble, get to the rim, create fouls, this, that. Jaden Bradley is a different speed. He finishes the game with 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and then let's do it. Let's have the conversation about my boy Carter Bryant, okay? By the way, I have a buddy by the name of Carter Bryant who covers LSU football. Another conversation. I'm talking about Carter Bryant, who plays for the Arizona Wildcats. So I've been on Carter Bryant probably since the battle for Atlantis, and this kid, he's unbelievable, okay? Tommy Lloyd brings him off the bench. He plays the veteran Trey Townsend. Carter Bryant is one of the five best NBA prospects in college basketball. 6'8", does a little bit of everything. I keep saying it. I was at UConn at the same time as Rudy Gay. Okay, Rudy Gay might not necessarily totally ring a bell for you, but he was a McDonald's All-American, goes to UConn, was really good as a freshman. Actually, the rare player in that era that decided to come back for a second season, plays like an All-American, is a top 5 pick. But here's what you need to know about Rudy Gay. Just retired from the NBA prior to the start of this season, played 18 years in the NBA. Carter Bryant reminds me exactly of him. 6'8", shoots threes, so smooth, takes you off the dribble, finishes, athletic, defends, two-way. And you just started to see what this guy is capable of, scratching the surface of that potential in this game. 12 points in just 20 minutes of play, 2 3-pointers made. By the way, one of the 3-pointers he missed, grabbed the rebound and threw down an insane dunk. 5 rebounds, 3 blocks. I think it was Robbie Hummel that said, yeah, he's putting together a pretty sick NBA draft tape mix, okay? And so look, whether Carter Bryant goes pro or not, that's another conversation for another day. But as I was watching Arizona, it just really struck me. This team has a little bit of everything that you need to compete in the tournament. What do you need? Veteran guards, Jaden Bradley, third-year player, was a McDonald's All-American, by the way. Caleb Love, fifth-year player, was obviously a McDonald's All-American, Final Four hero. KJ Lewis will one day be an NBA player, although obviously I think he's regressed. Carter Bryant, NBA player. You go on and on down the list. By the way, great call by producer Matt. We do have our Torres on Arizona page. If you're a Wildcats fan, you better be following Torres on Arizona. Mary does an amazing job. She's our intern who helps run that. Torres on Arizona, okay? But I bring it up, all the pieces. Toby Awaka, beast. Again, a Mike Lukeism. He's got a lot of girth, okay? That guy's girthy. Henry Visar off the bench. I mean, they have a little bit of everything. And I think what stands out to me, again, just feel like one of the more underrated teams in the sport going into the heart of this tournament. This was a team, listen, we've talked about it time and time again. At one point, we know that they were 4-5, right around Christmas time, okay? They lose to UCLA in Phoenix. You think the season's over. I don't think people realize how good this team has been, though, okay? So since they went 4-5, do the math. They are obviously 19-7 overall. Since let's see here. Since they beat Texas Tech, which is a great win in its own right, on February 8th, they only have, now it sounds like a lot. They have 5 losses. But 5 losses in the last 6 weeks, okay? But 2 of them were to Houston. 1 was at Iowa State. 1 was at Kansas. The other one was at Kansas State, which, by the way, was a talented team playing well at the time. But I just bring it up because you basically go back until the 1st of January, until Christmas time. They really don't have a bad loss outside of that Kansas State game. And so I just bring it up because when I look at this team, again, made a run at the Big 12 tournament, beat Texas Tech twice. Like, a lot of people think Texas Tech is a Final Four team. The more that I watch them, the more that I worry a little bit. But I just bring it up because you look at Arizona, what pieces don't they have? And you can't say that they aren't battle-tested. Played in the Big 12. By the way, I thought it was interesting. They talked about it on the broadcast today. Tommy Lloyd felt like, okay, I come from Gonzaga, coached in the WCC, coached in the Pac-12. That didn't prepare us for March the way that the Big 12 did, and it's better to take a few more losses in league play and be prepared for this tournament than be underprepared from playing in a weaker conference. And so Arizona is checking all the boxes. Again, they're playing, I think, much better than people realize. Again, because of that 4-5 start. Listen, I'm not a huge believer in West Coast bias, but I do think there was some West Coast bias there. A lot of late-night games, midweek games, Monday, Tuesday games, 10, 11 o'clock, Eastern time. People just aren't staying up. And I saw them at the end of the year. They're ranked like 24th in the country, 23rd, 19th, 18th, 21, whatever. It's like that team is so much better than people realize. And so Arizona right now, listen, they're peaking. They're playing really well. Again, good week at the Big 12 tournament. Beat Kansas in Kansas City. Beat Texas Tech for a second time. By the way, the Houston game, they were up at half and kind of in control, and then Houston just went all Houston on them. So I really like this Arizona team. They draw Oregon, who I believe has just about closed out their game. They have officially beaten Liberty. They'll play Oregon. I think they match up really well with Oregon. And I'll tell you what, a very interesting potential Sweet 16 matchup waiting with the Duke Blue Devils. We'll get to Duke in a minute. Really quick, do want to shout out one more team. How about this? Torres missed his first best bet of March Madness because I had Oklahoma plus 6.5 against the UConn Huskies. It did not happen as UConn gets the victory in this game. It wasn't always pretty, but UConn gets the win. By the way, I'm going to send out a tweet really quick, so everybody stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Hold on. Got to let our Torres on UConn page know we're talking live UConn Huskies. One second, people. 1 second. All right. First of all, Thomas Chophouse Cards, I appreciate it. Super chat. Thank you very much. By the way, one, thank you. Two, great question by you. Andrew Slater is a beast. I will text him that, I'm excited. I'm excited for the Will Wade era. I think it's good for the ACC. And I think it's, it's good for the ACC. Duke shouldn't be going 19-1. Louisville, as good as I think Pat Kelsey is, shouldn't be going 18-2. Just shouldn't. By the way, Clemson definitely shouldn't be going 18-2. So thank you, Thomas. Appreciate your support of the show. That said, let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's go ahead and talk about another team that picked up a victory on Friday night. It wasn't always pretty, but I'll tell you this. It was historic as the UConn Huskies take down the Oklahoma Sooners 67-59. I'll say this. How about this for a stat? I did not realize this watching the game, okay? But UConn, I knew UConn, obviously back-to-back champions. This is their 13th straight NCAA tournament win. That is now tied for the second longest streak ever, joining the 91-93 Duke Blue Devils. Of course, Duke went back-to-back in 91-92. They win their opener in 93. They talked about it on the broadcast. Grant Hill was on the broadcast. He was on that Duke team. They lost to Cal with Jason Kidd in the second round of the NCAA tournament. So how about the Huskies? 13 straight NCAA tournament wins with this victory. By the way, I tweeted this out. Maybe the most insane stat that I've ever seen in college basketball did come to an end. UConn, how about this? Had won. This is insane. UConn had won coming into this game, not only 12 straight NCAA tournament games, they had won 12 straight NCAA tournament games by double figures, by 10 plus points. Listen, I don't want to oversell stuff, but there are a lot of crazy stats in sports. We say, oh, that record's unbreakable. That record's this, that record's that. I don't know that we will ever see anybody break that record because you would have to win back-to-back national titles, every game by double figures, and then, oh, by the way, come back the third year and win at least one game by double figures. It shows you how dominant UConn has been over the last 2 years. This has been a different team, but let me also take a moment and say this. I've been a doubter. I've been a critic. I've said on this show, I truly don't think there's some incredible secret sauce to this team that they're just going to figure it out because they have 2 back-to-back national championships, but it was gutty. It was resilient, and it was impressive. First of all, I'll say this. We do the transfer portal rankings every summer. I had Torres Reed pretty high, the transfer from Michigan. Torres Reed has become UConn's most important player. in this game, 12.7 boards off the bench, and really in multiple stretches where UConn kind of was stagnant on offense. Torres Reed, they just dumped the ball down to him, and he looked like Shaq in his prime, just stuffing it in dudes' faces. Got in a little bit of foul trouble. Obviously, like a lot of people, didn't love the whistle. UConn, both big men were in foul trouble in this game. Listen, 13 total fouls. I don't know how mad you can be, but Torres Reed was phenomenal. And then how about this? How about the captain, Alex Karaban? Alex Karaban finishing this game. Couple monster shots laid, a big three when they needed it the most, a big defensive rebound to get the win. 13 points was second most only to Solo Ball. And so let me say this for UConn. One, I said it a second ago. I don't mean to be negative. It's just real. This team isn't what the last 2 years have been. That's okay. 2 years ago, they had, how many NBA guys have they had? They lost 4 NBA guys off of last year's team. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, and of course the 2 lottery picks, Donovan Clingan and Solo Ball. The year before, Steph Castle, excuse me. Donovan Clingan the year before, Andre Jackson the year before, Jordan Hawkins the year before, Adama Sanogo, who of course was the Final Four most outstanding player. They've lost so many players. It doesn't matter who you are. You can't replicate that, especially in a program that is so fundamentally and foundationally built on player development. No disrespect to Duke, no disrespect to Kentucky, but Dan Hurley said it. They're not a school that just brings in 5 McDonald's All-Americans and then brings in 5 more the next year. They're a developmental school. They're a developmental program. And just at some point, they were going to hit a wall. But the other thing that Dan Hurley has consistently said is that when you get to March, you don't want to play us and you don't want to deal with us. And I think there is something to it. You go to the Big East tournament. They get the opening round win. They play Creighton really tough. It came down to the wire, back and forth, whatever, this and that. And they get the victory. They find a way against Oklahoma. Now, they advance to the round of 32. I'll say this. Listen, it's going to be tough. I'm not going to sit here and lie and pretend it's going to be anything other than really tough against Florida, a team that obviously, look, I think most experts picked to win the national championship. My national championship was Houston over Auburn, which I'm not feeling great about, by the way, more from the Auburn perspective. But Florida's amazing. But the one thing I will say, a couple things. One, Florida has the size, the physicality, the shooting, the this, the that. But you think Florida was happy when they saw the draw with UConn? Now, I think the key for UConn, they're going to have to crash the glass. They're going to have to defensive rebound because Florida is an unbelievable rebounding team. Size, athleticism. By the way, it looks like they are the first tip-off on Sunday. So the standalone game on Sunday, UConn versus Florida, it was literally officially announced seconds ago. And so I just bring it up to very simply say that you look at this matchup, I think it's going to be interesting because Florida, they rebound insanely well. And I think that's going to be the key. Can Samson Johnson and Torres Reed stay out of foul trouble? Because if they can't, I think UConn, I think they'll be okay. They need to make some threes. Obviously, Hassan Diarra, who's battling through that knee injury, needs to do what he, just needs to stay on the court. He's going to be key on Walter Clayton. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that it's going to be easy, say that they're going to get a win, say that because the jersey says UConn that they're going to get the victory. But the counter to that is also true as well. You think Florida was happy when they saw UConn in the draw in the round of 32? You think Florida was happy when they're starting the scouting report? They see a future lottery pick in Liam McNeely, Solo Ball, who will play in the NBA, Alex Karaban, who I know has been up and down, but will play in the NBA, Torres Reed, who's an absolute monster. I don't think so. So we'll see what happens. Very cool. I'm excited. I didn't realize as I was talking here, that is a 12:10 Eastern start time. It is the opening tip-off. By the way, as always, for wall-to-wall coverage, Torres on UConn on the Torres page, Torres on UConn, Torres on UConn for all your late-breaking portal news or all your late-breaking UConn news. And by the way, once we get to the offseason, UConn is going to be very active in the portal. Really quickly, we'll get to a couple other results from the day. Again, it was just not a day where there was like a ton to really react to. First of all, I mentioned that UConn will play Florida in the second round of the NCAA Tournament standalone game, 12:10 Eastern time. Gonna have to get up early and get the dog out because that's gonna be a good one. Florida rolls 95-69 over Norfolk State. Listen, playing as well as anybody. 95 points, 23 points for Walter Clayton, 6 for 11 from 3. And then, like I said, just they're so big and so physical on the glass, plus 13 in rebounding. Ruben Chinyelu with 8. Micah Hanlogton with 8. Alex Condon was phenomenal with 12 and 5. Listen, a lot of people have them winning the national championship. I don't think it is a stretch to say that they might be the best team in the country. It's really funny. We all season long, it was Auburn. Then it was, Duke for about a 2-3 week stretch. Now it just feels like everything is clicking for the Florida Gators. They beat Alabama. They beat Tennessee in the SEC championship game. They roll in their opener. And as you can see on the screen, Walter Clayton, a threat to score every time he touches the ball. It's funny, even during the game, they kind of referenced in passing, is Walter Clayton the best point guard in college basketball? I think there might actually be something to that because I think they are really, really, really good. Let's get to, we'll just talk really quick about Duke. I actually see a comment in the chat that I want to get to because I think that might be an interesting conversation. Duke rolls past Mount St. Mary's, final score 93-49. The only story here was that Cooper Flagg was not only back, Cooper Flagg played 22 minutes, was the second most of any starter in this game. Listen, we debated and over-debated and debated and talked. Is Cooper Flagg even going to play in the NCAA tournament? How long is he going to play? Is he going to sit out the opener on Friday to get ready for Sunday? You don't need to risk it. Well, apparently John Shire just felt like, you know what, screw it. We're going to roll. We're going to go for it anyway. And I was actually a little bit surprised at how much he played. Like I said, second most minutes with 22 overall, and they just didn't have to play very many guys because, again, this is a team that, this is a team that is deep, is talented. They're playing a 16 seed. You play all year to have this easy opening round game, and I was surprised. But I think the positive of it is that Cooper Flagg looked good. 6 of 12 from the field, 14.7 boards, 4 assists. He looked pretty Cooper Flagg-ish to me as Duke gets the victory. They will next face Baylor. That will also be a standalone game at 2:40 Eastern time, or 2:40 Eastern time on Sunday. So, the college basketball gods, they're giving us UConn into Duke. That Raleigh regional will open things up on Sunday. And yeah, it'll be really interesting. I'll tell you what, I'm going to skip most of the rest of the games because I see, Alabama, they struggled, whatever. We don't have to talk about it. But I will tell you this. I saw something interesting in the chat that I want to get to really quick. So our guy, and I always apologize because I don't know how to say your Twitter handle or your YouTube handle. Peanut Butter Posse. Okay, the Peanut Butter Posse, okay? He put out this, and I think it's really interesting. Fun fact. All 4 of the number 1 seeds have made it past the first round of the NCAA tournament for the first time ever. So if this March Madness is feeling a little less madnessy, there you go. I actually did not realize that as we're recording. All 4 number 1 seeds, obviously Duke, Florida, Auburn, and who's the other one? Florida, Auburn, Duke, and Houston advance. We're not going to go through all, but this is obviously the first time that we have ever seen all 4 seed lines in the first and second round of the NCAA tournament, first round of the NCAA tournament advance. And I'll tell you this, I was actually thinking about this. It feels less madnessy, but I'll also say, I think this might become the new norm. And I think college basketball fans need to be ready for it. And it's pretty simple. It's because of the fact that all those good mid-major players are now playing high major college basketball, okay? And so, first of all, I think it's a couple variables. One, I think that first of all, I just think the number 1 seeds I think they're just better than they've been. Like, I was thinking about that, the Virginia team that lost in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. DeAndre Hunter, remember, was hurt. He was an NBA player. Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome were playing. But that Virginia team without DeAndre Hunter wasn't anything special. They had one NBA player in Ty Jerome. Like, they weren't that good. Now compare it to Florida that has 4 dudes that are 6'10" that can all play, that has 3 or 4 guards that are 4th, 5th, 6th-year seniors. You compare it to Auburn, a bunch of 23, 24-year-old, 25-year-old, in Chad Baker-Mazara's case, grown men. And so to me, I just think the 1 seeds and 2 seeds are better. But But I think it's also directly results in all of these good players from the low and mid majors are now transferring up. Like, it's funny. We're really going to dive into the portal stuff here over the next couple days. But what I think is interesting is that early on in this kind of portal, world that we've started kind of going down, it felt like, yeah, guys would enter the portal, but a lot of guys, if you're playing well at a mid-major, if you're happy, if you're having fun, if you like your school, if you got a girlfriend, if you like the coach, you kind of decide to just come back. But now the money is so big that you don't really have a choice. And what I find interesting is basically every leading scorer of every mid-major that I see is entering the portal and basically just looking for that payday up. And so, it's funny because I saw this tweet from Sam Vazini, a guy that I respect. He said, let me see what he said. He said this. I think he said, tweeted this at about, it would have been midnight Eastern or so. He said, what's been a bummer about this NCAA tournament first round for me is that we haven't had a mid-major get wild hot and push a team. Bryant, which was at the time pushing Michigan State, is pushing Michigan State, but it's not because they're on fire. We just haven't gotten that one super fun game to watch where it's haymaker after haymaker. You want to know why there's no haymaker after haymaker? It's pretty simple. And I like Sam, so this is not like in any way a criticism of Sam. It's because all those players are playing for the high major teams. Like, yeah, you think if Janai Broome was still at Morehead State, he couldn't be a 13 seed and pull off an upset against a 4? I think he probably could. I think he'd be dunking on cats right now. I just, Walter Clayton might be the best guard in America. You think if he was still at Iona, you think he could have put up 30 against whoever as a 13, 14 seed? You go on down the list. I'm just trying to think here off the top of my head. Like, Duke has 3 or 4 older guys. Alabama, Mark Sears, where did he start? Mac, Mid-American Athletic, not the Mid-American, the Mid-American Conference. Like, and so I just bring it up because look at all these teams and look at all these schools, and it's not just those guys. Florida, their starting backcourt is Elijah Martin. Yeah, Grant Nelson. Producer Matt just brought up Grant Nelson. Perfect example. Was at North Dakota State. Almost went pro out of North Dakota State. Decides to transfer up to Alabama. But look at Florida. Elijah Martin, Will Richard, and Walter Clayton started at Florida Atlantic, started at Belmont, I want to say, with Will Richard, and started at Iona. Like, look at, Peanut Butter Posse, I think, is a Kentucky fan. Lamont Butler started at San Diego State. That's not really a mid-major, but it sort of is. Andrew Carr, I know he was at Wake Forest last year, but he was at a mid-major before that. Oh, by the way, producer Matt brings up a couple good ones in the chat. Dalton Connect a year ago. Janelle Davis was at Florida Atlantic. Yeah, like if Nelly, you want to see a mid-major throw haymakers? If Nelly Davis, Elijah Martin, and Vlad Golden, who's now at Michigan, were all still at Florida Atlantic. By the way, Nick Boyd, who was basically their 6th man, was like the best player at San Diego State this year. And so, again, I hope this doesn't come off as me criticizing Vecini, but I just think it's really pretty simple. But I also think that with these players all transferring up, I just think it's going to be harder for these teams to build good rosters, to forget retaining players. And I think there's going to be that night where somebody goes, 17 of 24 from 3. And I'm saying that as a team, not a player. But yeah, there's going to be a night where a team goes 17 of 24 from 3 and they pull off an upset as a 14 seed. But I think more and more, I think the top of the sport is getting better. Look at even in Arizona. Arizona's a 4 seed, okay? Caleb Love transfer from UNC. Jaden Bradley transfer from Alabama. You go on and on down the list. Trey Townsend was a 5th-year guy who played at Oakland last year. And I just think these top teams are going to continue to get better. And I think the gap in money is making it impossible. I'll tell you this. I also think this is a little bit of a sad thing too. I think it's really putting coaches in a bind where coaches want to stay at places, but it's just like the money is so big at some of these places, and the money that you need to compete at the highest level is so big they have no choice. I'll give you an example. Nico Medved, the coach of Colorado State, he's a Minnesota alum. The Minnesota job opened 3 years ago. He turned it down. By all accounts, he's going to take it this year because my guess is at Colorado State, he just can't raise the money needed to retain his roster year over year over year over year over year. Where at Minnesota, he's going to have $6-7 million. I don't know about that, but like the upper end of NIL is probably going to be like somewhere in the $6 to $8 million range, maybe higher, maybe 10. And if he needs it at Minnesota, he can probably get it in the Big Ten. I don't know that he can get it other places. Sean Miller, I think there's a lot of people that think that Sean Miller, if the Texas job opens, is actually the favorite for that job. I love Sean, but when he took the Xavier job, what I think is interesting, when he took the Xavier job, he also had South Carolina offered him their job. And I think he felt like I can win bigger at Xavier than with the 15th, 16th best job in the SEC. Now I feel like he doesn't think that anymore. Like if you go to South Carolina, you can raise money there much easier than you can at Xavier. So I just think, I don't think that this is necessarily a thing that is going, I think this is going to change college basketball. I really do, because I'm not saying that we'll never see a 2 seed pull off, get upset in round 1. I'm never saying we'll see a 15. Listen, Alabama easily could have lost. Michigan State struggled, but I just think it's going to be harder for these teams to pull off upsets because the top is better than it's been, and I think the bottom, frankly, is a little bit worse than it's been as well. Producer Matt shouting out New Mexico G5. Producer Matt, I hate to say it, that's actually kind of a perfect example. Like New Mexico is set up pretty well for a G5 school. And I think Richard Pitino is trying to get out. I think he's like, I would rather take my shot. He was in the Big Ten, but I think he's like, I would rather take my shot at the 13th best ACC job than try to do it from the Mountain West year over year over year. So it kind of sucks. By the way, completely unrelated side tangent, but I think part of it too is the net, right? I think part of it too is the net, because you see a situation where, you're just so rewarded for playing in one of these power conferences. You're so rewarded for playing in the SEC, where again, it's better right now to finish in 13th place in the SEC than in 3rd place in the Atlantic 10, 13th place in the SEC than going 29-5 like UC Irvine did in another league. So I just bring it up because Peanut Butter Posse, I don't think you intended to bring up such an interesting conversation, but you did. I appreciate you, and I think it is a great conversation. I'll tell you what, this is what we're going to do. Take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to wrap the show. UNC lost. I think what we'll do on some of these shows, as these teams lose, we'll talk a little bit about what needs to happen in the offseason. UNC struggled quite a bit throughout the season. Listen, I'll say it now so we don't have to say it during the segment. They shouldn't have been in the tournament. I don't care that they beat San Diego State. Shouldn't have been in. What do they do now? We'll take a quick break. Be right back. What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, long day of podcasting. Sometimes don't always look the best. So look at this. It's a little bit not great, okay? Well, here is the great news. The great people at Filebox said, Torres, you're a professional. You just got 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You need to look better. And so they sent me a couple awesome things. I want to pull them out for you right now. This is all from the winter collection, by the way. Spring collection is coming out. We got the vest, very, very, very nice. The sweater, very professional for when I go to professional events. We got these nice blue jeans. I think the question now everybody's asking is, Torres, how do you actually look when you put that stuff on? Let's find out. Well, what do you think? Sweater fits perfectly. Great for all occasions. When I go to games, when I go out to a dinner, warm weather, cool weather, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, these jeans are phenomenal. Great for games, great for social events. Oh, by the way, a little bit stretchy if those New Year's resolutions aren't going on as planned. Really quickly, we got to try out. Let's try out the vest. It fits perfectly. Not a surprise. So here's the deal. If you want to look as good as Torres, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to Fioboc.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C. Fioboc.com. And here's the best part. For listeners to the Aaron Torres pod, you get 20% off with code Torres20 at checkout. We also put a referral link in all of our YouTube videos. Thank you to Fioboc. By the way, make sure you're following them on social media at F-I-O-B-O-C. Thank you to Fioboc. You want to look as good as Torres, check them out. Again, promo code Torres20 for 20% off. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. If you're just joining us, we were talking about how there were no top 4 seed lines upset. I should mention, Sam throws this up in the chat. Aaron's Saturday and Sunday will be fun. So I happen to agree with you, man, because I'll say this, we're doing the survivor pool. You look at the games on Saturday, I think a lot of them could go either way. I know some people in the chat will disagree. By the way, we do have an update. Yes, 72 out of the 94 entries are still alive. So what is that? About 25% have been cut already. Torres is still alive. Mrs. Torres is still alive. Mrs. Torres' sister is still alive. So we'll see, as are many of you. Let's see here. Dan Rivera says, for producer Matt. 21 took Kentucky today, 12 Michigan State, and Iowa State. Dude, Dan, I appreciate you plugging in. I will be honest, I did take Kentucky today. Just with the injuries, it just felt like the right time to take them. So Kentucky was my pick for today. I will not reveal who I have on Saturday because transparently, I haven't made my pick yet. But the thing I was going to say, it's a great point by Sam in that a lot of the game Saturday could go either way. So I know I've said that there's not been a lot of upsets, but would anybody be stunned if Creighton beat Auburn? I wouldn't be. Would anybody be stunned if McNeese beat Purdue? I wouldn't be. Would anybody be stunned if A&M Michigan could go either way? I think Tennessee, UCLA. Now that UCLA is actually on the East Coast and Mick Cronin isn't complaining, they're actually playing well. So there's a lot of games that could go either way. I think it's a good point by Sam. We can sit there and say, all these upsets haven't happened. But I think part of it is that maybe, just maybe, the madness is about to come here over the next 2 days. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap. Producer Matt, he's still drinking the Auburn Kool-Aid. Producer Matt, you got to if Auburn can't play well tomorrow after Stephen Pearl and Dylan Cardwell berating the team in the media availability, then they don't deserve to win. All right. So before we get to the final segment, do want to thank our friends, do want to thank our partners. People, I want to thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so it's March Madness. It's March. You're on the couch. You're sitting there. You're watching wall-to-wall basketball. You've probably been on the couch for 12, 13, 14 hours. You need a snack that is both healthy but delicious as well. My friends, my people, my crew, that's where Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com comes in. Okay, baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. Joey is the founder, family-owned business, not far from where I live. Joey's a sports fan just like you and I. Joey's a sports fan, and Joey basically was sitting on the couch one day and said, I need a snack that is healthy while I watch all these games. Rams season ticket holder. I need a snack that's healthy for my tailgates, all that. And he came up with, by the way, healthy for my kids too. Not for my kids, for Joey's kids, founder of Collie Puffs. And he basically said, I need a snack that is healthy but delicious for them as well. And that is where Collie Puffs come in. As I said, baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease. The healthy ingredients are great, but the best part is, you know what? They taste freaking delicious as well. At this point, you got to try them. Go to ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. ColliePuffs.com. Or you can go to Amazon.com. Just search Amazon. Go to Amazon. Search Collie Puffs. Throw them in your cart. Ship them to your house. You'll love them. You'll thank Torres later. Thank you to Collie Puffs. All right, with that said, do want to wrap on one more topic. Would love to know. Dan Rivera references that the other day during our NCAA Tournament preview show that nobody said, I don't want Cheeto dust on my junk. And that was his only complaint about Collie Puffs. So, yes, Dan, that was a thing that was said in the chat. The chat gets a little rowdy whenever Collie Puffs comes up. So thank you again to Collie Puffs. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap the show. One other game I want to talk about, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about this game as much as I want to talk about what's next. The game that happened, final score in the South Regional. The game was played in, where was it played at? It was played in Milwaukee. So South Regional in Milwaukee, Ole Miss versus UNC. And of course, UNC, we know about the controversy to open the week. We know about the fact that they did get let in. Whatever, it's over. They beat San Diego State. Everybody says, can they make a run in the NCAA tournament? They got in. They beat San Diego State. No, they largely get walloped by Ole Miss. They were down 18 points at the half, as they've basically done all year. They made a run in the second half. It wasn't enough. They came up short. They lose this game. Final score 71-64. Okay. Now listen, I could sit here all day and break down this game and what does it mean for Ole Miss? They're going to play Iowa State, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's what most of you care about, and I certainly don't think it's what most Carolina fans care about. What Carolina fans care about is that this season, even if you get into the NCAA tournament, it did not live up to expectations, and the conversation shouldn't be about should we have been in the tournament, should we have not been in the tournament. The conversation should be about how do we make sure that never happens ever again, that we're never on the cusp of the NCAA tournament, that we're never, needing to hope and pray. And frankly, I'll say this, I don't want to speak for Carolina fans because I don't speak for any fan base, not even UConn, my alma mater, but I think a lot of Carolina fans were like, I don't even want to go to the NCAA tournament. I know they were playing better down the stretch, but I think a lot of people are more curious for what is ahead this offseason. And it goes without saying, this is the most important offseason of Hubert Davis's career. 2 years ago, after you start number one and miss the NCAA tournament, that one was really important. He knocked it out of the park, retained Armando Bacot, retained RJ Davis, added a couple really nice pieces. Well, he has his work to do this offseason. And I want to talk about what they need to do to make sure that this does not happen again, because he ain't getting another year to fix it. And we talked about it at the time, but when he started publicly talking about needing a GM, which I know a GM has since been hired, that's when I knew. He talked to his AD, him and the AD basically agreed, you're going to get one more year, figure it out, no excuses, we'll give you what you need. By the way, Carolina fans should mention, if you want to go to Raleigh this weekend to root against the Duke Blue Devils, you can get tickets on SeatGeek. SeatGeek.com, use promo code Torres, $20 off your first purchase. Just go, buy some, root against Duke. UConn fans, if you're in the chat, SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. Kentucky fans, if you're in the chat, you want to go to Milwaukee, SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. Okay, so Carolina, what needs to happen in the offseason? First of all, I'll say this, I'm just fascinated by who comes back. Okay, so we know RJ Davis has graduated. I think that's the term, right? People get mad when you say he did graduate. It's like, oh no, he has been graduated. I don't know. There's some fancy terminology for it, whatever. He's out of eligibility. 5 years, was the ACC Player of the Year a year ago, mostly struggled. I don't think it was totally his fault. I think the roster was kind of too many small guards, whatever. But RJ Davis is gone. I think what'll be really interesting is what happens from there. It's early. We just don't know what this roster is going to look like. But I'll say this is, Ian Jackson and Drake Powell to me are fascinating. Ian Jackson by the end of the year played pretty well. He finished averaging about 12 points, 40% shooting from three. But listen, the last 5 games are pretty reflective of the up and down nature of the Ian Jackson experience. 1 point against Ole Miss, 9 against San Diego State, 0 against Duke in that NCAA tournament game, 3 against Wake Forest in the ACC tournament. And how about this? 4. So in his final 5 games this season, a total of 17 points. And so I just bring it up because this kid was a projected one and done. This kid was this kid was that. He had his moments. He was even great, I would say, for about a 6-7 game stretch in the middle of the year. But he's so up and down. Same with Drake Powell. And listen, if anybody wants to go pro, if anybody wants to, just, hey, I want to, try, I don't want to be in school or I want to try to make it, whatever, blah, blah, that's fine. But both of those guys, I think their draft stock has tank's not the right word, but I don't think it was as strong as it was going into the year. And I'll also say this is I don't think in 2025, now again, everyone's financial situation is different. I'm not telling people what to do, but if you're not good enough to go in the first round, come back to college because you're getting paid in college. And again, I don't know the financials at North Carolina. I think they were a little behind in NIL. We'll get to that in a minute, but you're going to get paid at Carolina. Come back, get better. Be part of a program that you've wanted to be part of. Ian Jackson talks about his relationship with Hubert Davis. Text him every morning, text him every night, whatever. And Drake Powell, by the way, is a North Carolina guy. Why are you rushing to the NBA when you can come back, make money, and get better in college? I think, by the way, we're going to see this across college basketball over the next, frankly, this offseason, but then even beyond that going forward. I think we're going to see a lot of kids say, you know what? I can go take a chance to be a second-round pick. I'm just going to stay and make bank here. So what do those guys do? Obviously, Elliot Cadeau is not an NBA prospect. You hear a little buzz, 2 seasons for him. Is it possible that he could transfer 9 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists per game? I mean, he could. I don't think his issues are North Carolina related. I think his issues are he's a 6'1" point guard that doesn't shoot the ball very well. And the shooting was better to his credit this year, 34%. So to me, another one. Come back. It's not a Carolina problem that you shoot 34%. You shoot 37, 38%. You're a different player. You're an All-American. You're probably a multi-million-dollar college basketball player going forward. And so I think, to me, I'm just curious to see what those 3 are going to do. I assume Cadeau is back. The other 2 are better NBA prospects, but I think they kind of, I think both of their draft stocks were hurt, and I just don't understand why you would come back. I think the big thing going forward is you got to backfill. Now, the good news, and I should mention this, Caleb Wilson is coming, right? 5-star. We talked about Caleb Wilson a lot. Did a lot of updates on Caleb Wilson. 6'8", 6'9" forward from Atlanta. We don't need to reevaluate him in real time. But, the recruitment came down to Kentucky and Carolina. He chooses Carolina at 2 a.m. Eastern time on Inside the NBA. He wants to do it in his town of Atlanta. That's okay. But that was a big win for Hubert Davis. And so you have Caleb Wilson. We'll see who else comes back around him. And then finally, let me say this. You hired the GM. And I've said this and I stand by it. I know some Carolina fans agree. Some Carolina fans disagree. I think you just have to, if you're Carolina, you have to be, you needed to elevate the NIL. That's why you hired the GM. And so now there's no excuse. You have a guy focused solely on fundraising, solely on reaching out to people in the community, solely on making sure your basketball players get paid, NBA background, Jim Tanner, I believe his daughters may have gone to UNC. I can't remember all the details. But this guy has connections. This guy has contacts. Now it's time to go raise money and get a real team. Because the one thing, and we've talked about it for a calendar year now, you go back to the portal last year, Carolina just could not land players because the high finance, the high price transfers were going other places. They went after so many big men. Jonas Adu ends up at Arkansas. Who else? Cliff Omoyori ends up at Alabama. I think they kind of made a run at Agana and Yenso, which I didn't love, but he ends up at Kansas State. And there's a few others. I can't remember everybody, but they just missed on guy after guy after guy after guy after guy. And I will say this is a team that, was never great, but I think you have a true five-man. It's a completely different season. They weren't that far off. Remember, they almost won at Kansas. Clearly easily could have beaten Duke the other day. Played Florida tough. You think about some of the games that they played, like they were in a lot of these games. They just didn't have the size. So to me, that's the big thing. You have to get a true five-man, and you're out of excuses in the portal with NIL money because you now have a GM. So we'll talk plenty about Carolina. I'm sure they are going to hit the ground running. Should mention, by the way, Seth Trimble, actually turned into a really good player. And I say actually not in a negative way, just he was a guy that maybe we weren't talking about enough in the preseason. 12 points per game. He's a junior. He has another year of eligibility. I assume he's going to be back. I'll say this. I actually think Carolina's going to bounce back. I'm a little bit higher on them. I just thought, it's easy in hindsight to talk about what a disaster it was. But we also talked last May and June when we did our off-season evaluation pieces that they just don't have a big guy. And if you don't have a five, how are you going to survive in college basketball in 2025? So I do think that, Carolina, I think now that they have the GM, some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, some of the money stuff in order, now it's time to go get some players. They're going to do that starting Monday. By the way, we are going to have wall-to-wall portal coverage, not just of Carolina, but of everybody. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. I think that's actually a great place to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. I know we got some good questions. I apologize, but it is 1:20 Eastern time. I think it's time for me to get out of here. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Thank you to SeatGeek, our partners, SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres if you need tickets. Oh, by the way, also thank you to BetUS TV, all your sports coverage, BetUS TV. Time for me to go. No show Saturday night. We will be back Sunday night at some point to recap. Hopefully not quite this late. Hopefully some of these games end a little bit earlier and we get you out of here because Monday is going to be, 1, y'all got to work. 2, the portal opens, so we're going to be busy. Time for me to go. Appreciate your support. Shout out to Torn Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back. New episode